All of us have long been accustomed to the fact that many boxers despise their opponents. For us, it has become something ordinary, something that we see in almost every fight. So it's so unusual and pleasant to observe when, instead of trash talking and humiliation, the opponents show genuine respect to each other. And I'm not talking about those cases where the guys just touch the gloves before the fight, but examples of real mutual respect in the toughest moments. My friends, today's video will be dedicated to 10 bright moments of respect between boxers. Please don't forget about the likes, comments with forwards, and subscribe to the channel so you will never miss any upcoming videos. Here we go. Number 10. Plant Canelo. Let's open the list with the most recent fight in the compilation. At the end of 2021, the world-famous super middleweight champion Saul Alvarez got a golden opportunity to become the undisputed champion of the world in his weight class. All he had to do was become the first person to beat the undefeated Caleb Plant, the IBF belt holder. Despite some slight trash talk from both sides, it was by no means difficult to promote this fight, as any poster with Alvarez's name on it automatically made the box office, and Sweet Hands was known to the public because of his touching history of winning the title. But the guy still managed to add a twist to the confrontation. At one of the official events, they got into a little scuffle, as a result of which Plant caught a Mexican hook. It was clear that this was going to be a fiery encounter, and our expectations were met. Caleb, who was not expecting to do much, stole 5 or even 6 opening rounds from the pound-for-pound king, making thousands of betting fans frantically cancel their bets. However, Canelo gradually picked up the pace and got into the groove. He put all his strength into the fight and set such a pace and pressure that even the resilient Plant could not hold up and broke down in the 11th round. It seemed that the conflict before the fight spoiled the relationship between these two, but when it was time for Canelo to give an interview, he unexpectedly gave warm words about his opponent.
Respect for Caleb Plant. He's a very difficult fighter. He has a lot of ability. I do respect the fighter.
Even after becoming the undisputed world champion, Alvarez didn't forget the respect, and that is priceless. Number 9. Tony Bellew, David Haye. A fight between two compatriots is a pretty rare event among top boxers, but this particular event happened in the spring of 2018. The incredibly experienced David Haye, who hasn't been through everything possible in this life, was out for a rematch with Tony Bellew. In the first fight between the British, Klitschko's sworn enemy looked very cool and was winning confidently, but in the 6th round, he suffered a terrible Achilles tendon injury and eventually lost. Now the veteran had to fight the bomber again and prove that the outcome of the first meeting was no more than a coincidence. Tony, meanwhile, had done a lot of work on his mistakes and was already looking a lot more convincing in this fight. Pulling his opponent on himself, Bellew knocked down Haye twice in the 3rd round. After each fall, you could read the words in their eyes of the haymaker. "Tough punch, kid, but I'm not done with you yet." Nevertheless, in the 5th round, Tony finally found his punch and finished a battered David. You could read the disappointment of his own defeat in the veteran's eyes, but he went over to Bellew anyway, hugged him and praised him for his great performance. There wasn't much negativity between the two men before the fight, and now that everything was settled, they were more like cronies than competitors.
But I take nothing away. He goes down a better fighter than me. He's a better fighter. He's a legend of the sport. He's been great, so I'm just happy I've won, man.
Number 8. Gennady Golovkin vs Saul Alvarez 2. It's rare to find a truly kind and open person among boxers, but that's exactly what the former world super middleweight champion Gennady Golovkin is. Up until 2018, it was hard to imagine that the Kazakh could be defeated at all. He was on a tremendous winning streak and was defending his WBA belt for the 20th time. Simultaneously with him, a new star, Saul Alvarez, was rising at full speed. A few years ago, all the fans saw Canelo as just a Mexican kid who got beaten up by the old Floyd. Gradually, this kid matured and soon had an impressive winning streak. for which he got his first fight with Golovkin. Gennady harshly dealt with Saul, but by some miracle the judges saw a draw, so a super middleweight rematch was expected, and it turned out to be much more competitive. Canelo's heavy punches caused the champion's face to be painted, but Golovkin himself was hitting just as hard, although there were no marks left on Alvarez's body. The fight as a whole was evenly matched, and it was difficult to determine the winner until the final bell. But there was one specific moment that interests us in this confrontation. In the final round, the Mexican went forward with renewed vigor, but he was so charged with the punch that he miscalculated while punching with the right hand to the body and sank on the canvas. In the heat of the fight, Golovkin automatically prepared his hand to deliver an open jaw uppercut, but at the last second he stopped himself, moving away from Canelo and let him get up. Almost every other fighter in Gennady's position would not have been able to stop himself or would have made an illegal punch on purpose. But Triple G showed an unbelievable level of generosity and respect for his opponent. Number 7. Manny Pacquiao, Antonio Margarito. As I've always said, good guys in boxing can be counted on fingers of one hand, but if someone decides to do it, they will have to take into account Manny Pacquiao. Throughout his career, the pride of the Philippines has never resorted to trash talk and has always spoken respectfully about his opponents, and all press conferences with his participation were a real ray of light. But as in the case of Gennady, kindness did not prevent Pacquiao from delivering brutal knockouts. The future champion of the Hall of Fame had this epic original fights in many weight classes, and he became the champion in each one of them. So, in 2010, already legendary Manny got the title shot in the 8th division. This record looked simply wild, and only one small man in the whole world could dare to take such a desperate step. Pacquiao's opponent was Antonio Margarito, famous for his heavy punch and rock-like endurance. The meeting turned out to be a mega spectacle. The boxers did not stay at a long distance, constantly looking for opportunities to get closer and deliver as many punches as possible. Margarito was strong, but the more agile Filipino evaded the Mexican's signature blows and punished him, opening a cut under his right eye in the 3rd round. Gradually, Antonio's injury only worsened, blocking his view, but this strong man continued to go forward and take the best punches of Pac-Man. By the 12th round, there was no alive spot on the Mexican, but he continued to hold on, and this deeply impressed Pacquiao. Having the strength in reserve, Manny deliberately slowed down and stopped aggravating Margarito's already miserable condition, not wanting him to be completely blinded. That night, the boxing legend could have beaten his opponent to the technical knockout, but instead he showed Margarito incredible respect and let him proudly stand until the decision.
He's very tough and strong, and I never expect that one.
You never expected him to be as strong as he was?
Number 6. Arturo Gatti, Mickey Ward 3. Many boxers have repeatedly confessed that after a particularly tough fight, they seem to get closer to their opponent and begin to understand him as if they had been communicating with him for years. If that feeling appears after just one fight, it is safe to say that mentally, Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward have become like brothers. The trilogy between these stars of the 2000s can be called one of the most memorable in boxing history. In each of their 3 fights, the guys gave up a ton of energy and health, but in return they rewarded us with an unforgettable spectacle. And despite the wildest fights, it was always a mutually respectful atmosphere between them. After each fight, Mickey and Arturo showed immense respect to each other, but their climax was the final of their 3rd fight. After 30 rounds of pain, blood and epic violence in every sense of the word, the boxers stood face to face, then put their gloves on each other's shoulders and pressed their heads together, thus expressing the eternal bond between them. Seeing this picture, the cornermen on both sides didn't immediately intervene, but gave Gatti and Ward the time they needed. This scene later became truly iconic and showed that you can even get attached to your opponent. Number 5. Muhammad Ali, Jerry QUARRY. Well, of course, it was impossible not to mention the greatest in the list, even in such an unusual context. First and foremost, Muhammad Ali is remembered as a first-rate master of mental games who could amuse a crowd and, along with it, piss off his opponents. But no matter what Ali said before the fight, already in the ring and after, he showed his rivals a deep respect, and it was so with almost everyone. Jerry QUARRY was not an exception. The heavyweight with model looks got into the boxing in times when geniuses and genetic mutants were competing in the ring. But QUARRY himself was always no more than an outstanding boxer. In 1970, he crossed gloves with the greatest for the first time, who came back after his forced retirement. The meeting was then stopped due to Jerry's brow cut, and it seemed as though the boxers would never fight again. But in a couple of years, the situation in the royal weight division has changed dramatically. Muhammad lost for the first time in his career, and the Irishman himself won some important fights and was ranked pretty high, so a rematch between these two definitely made sense. Despite all the successes in previous performances, QUARRY just couldn't match the skill set that peak Ali possessed. The legend was faster, more accurate, and his punches caused a lot of damage. The domination of the greatest looked too obvious, so the fight had to be stopped. But the referee for some reason delayed it. At the beginning of the 7th segment, Muhammad again hit with a tough couple of punches, and then he could not stand it any longer. With the glove, he called the referee and let him know that the Irishman had had enough. The beating was stopped, and there could be no questions to the legend here. He could have attacked Jerry with another hail of blows, but instead he chose to save his opponent's health. True nobility and respect. Number 4. Mike Tyson, Clifford Etienne. Ask any boxing fan who in the comic book universe they would compare Mike Tyson to, and I'm more than sure that 95% of the time it will not be a positive character. Even in his younger years, Iron Mike gained the status of the bad guy who is sharp-tongued, and at the first opportunity he can rush into a fight. Mike, who was already out of control, lost his mind and began to do a lot of crazy things, not only between fights but even in the ring. By that time, his boxing career was slowly going to end, but he still managed to get the long-awaited title fight against Lennox Lewis. Unfortunately, Tyson didn't take the last chance and lost to the Jamaican champion by knockout. After this defeat, most of the audience abandoned Mike and thought that he could easily retire from the sport. But the former champion didn't give up so easily and soon returned on the fight against the ring's most spectacular boxer of 2000, Clifford Etienne, with one defeat in his career. It was a chance for young Clifford to make a name for himself, but he did not take the chance because already in the first round, Iron Mike knocked him out with his right hook. The outcome might have been a standard one for Mike, but afterwards he did something that nobody expected from him. The boxing legend stepped out of his role of the bad guy and helped Etienne from the canvas, and then he hugged him, supporting him in a real human way. So much unaccustomed respect for his opponent from the Iron Mike was definitely worthy of being on the list. Number 3. Gennady Golovkin, Ryota Murata. I guess you shouldn't be surprised that Gennady Golovkin is once again featured in this list, because it's no wonder I called him one of the most respectful guys in the business. Triple G met many rivals in his life, and many of them tried to have a verbal conflict with the Kazakh, but Gennady was always a kind and modest guy. He did not like to be led into offensive words of his opponents, but preferred to go into the ring and kill people with his blows. Last year, the great Golovkin had already turned 40 years old, but he was still high in the ratings and continued to hunt for belts. In a similar status was the Japanese fighter Ryota Murata, who was famous for his gold medal from the 2012 Olympics. Before the meeting, the sports veterans did not even try to cause a conflict. Instead, they took their turns praising each other's skills and expressing their deepest respect for their opponent. Despite the smooth communication, boxers had a tough blows exchange on the long and medium range in the ring. The initiative changed repeatedly, until in the 9th round, Gennady caught Murata with a clear hook. Having seen that the opponent started wobbling, Triple G did not even want to finish him, but then tried to land a final blow, though there was no need to. The Japanese fell down on his own. Ryota congratulated his rival on the victory, and Golovkin soon took the belt and went down to the podium, where he gave it to the defeated Murata. The Kazakh showed what it means to respect a worthy opponent with this gesture.
This is your belt for all life.
Number 2. Evander Holyfield, Mike Tyson. Surprisingly, twice in this top list is a man who certainly wouldn't be called a gentleman in the ring. Of course, we're talking about Mike Tyson, and specifically his relationship with Evander Holyfield. The history between these two elite heavyweights began with their first fight in 1996. Then cruiserweight champion Evander was brought to the Iron Mike for a slaughter, but Holyfield really shocked the world because he managed to beat Mike, and he did it prematurely. The sensation needed a continuation, and it soon followed, but not at all the way we expected it to. In the rematch, the boxers were both breaking the rules, using various dirty tricks, and in the 3rd round, the history of boxing was divided into before and after. Mike Tyson, in a state of impotent anger, took a bite of Holyfield's ear. It was so sudden and unexpected that most of the audience did not immediately understand what had happened here in the first place, and when they got it, people were simply discouraged. Tyson was disqualified for such a gross violation of the rules, which was perfectly reasonable. After those fights, especially the odd second one, the relationship between Mike and Evander was supposed to be as tense as possible. But as it later turned out, just a week after the fight, the heavyweights were seen at the same event and everything went smoothly. It turned out that the former rivals did not hold a grudge at all, but put mutual respect above all else. Afterwards, Holyfield and Tyson even became good friends, and for many years now, there are no resentments between them, but only gratitude and respect.
So what do you want to say to him? Because you told me that you told the world last week that apology was not sincere.
No, what I just want to say, and I just want the world to know that, no one, people who love me don't have to say them Evander's, this guy, that guy. This is a beautiful guy. Me and this guy both come from basically the sewage, and we watched each other grow to become established and esteemed fighters, you know what I mean? And I just want to know it's just been a pleasure passing through life, being acquainted with you.
Okay.
You know?
Number 1. Johnny Tapia, Paulie Ayala. You probably don't know these guys, but that only makes including them on this list, or rather at the top of it, more interesting. Johnny Tapia is one of the best boxers in the bantamweight and flyweight divisions of the turn of the 20th and 21st centuries. This modest-sized fighter was known for his stunning technique and power worthy of his weight, as well as indomitable as a steel rod character. In just 11 years, he had 48 fights and never lost, taking both WBO and IBF belts. In 1999, with just 2 months gap between fights, Johnny came out to defend his belt against Paulie Ayala. The slightly younger American was not very bright, but had a good record and looked very promising. Throughout the 12 rounds, the boxers of the disliked by the fans' lighter weight classes fought one exchange after another, shedding liters of blood, and did not want to give up even 1 inch of the ring. The challenger looked much better than he was expected to. Not only was he able to withstand the onslaught of Tapia, the division's main bully, but he also responded with no less heavy combinations. Still, the encounter went to the end, and victory here could have gone to anyone, but the judges chose to let the ring announcer announce the name of the new champion. Despite the 36 minutes of fighting, the athletes had only immense respect for each other, and they showed it in a very unusual way. First, John lifted Ayala above the ground and carried him around the ring, and then Paulie did the same. Though there was only one winner that night, in the eyes of the boxers themselves, they both turned out to be the best and gave the future generations the right example of how to treat your opponent. Showing respect to your opponent is more difficult than it seems. It's easy to talk about, but when it comes to action, few people can get over their emotions and beliefs to just help or be happy for the person who just a few minutes ago wanted to rip your head off. Respecting the other guys for his merits is really hard, but I think that's one of the many characteristics that make us human and not animals.